Laura Bible and Ashley Freeman were teenagers from Oklahoma. They went to elementary school together, and although they went to different high schools, they remained close friends. On December 30th, 1999, they were at Ashley's house in the town of Welch. A fire broke out in the home, and when it was extinguished, Ashley's parents were found dead. But Laura and Ashley were never seen again. I'm Ed Densel, and this is Unfound. On Unfound, due to the nature of this program, you get to hear family members explain the loss they continue to feel, sometimes decades later. They have a bunch of facts, but very few answers, and no resolutions. Yet they still have to find a way to continue. Many of them still have children or parents who need their attention. They can't often devote as much time to their loved one's disappearance as they'd like. Moreover, they have to find a way to rise from the ashes, to find any kind of personal joy in their lives again. It's an often overlooked part of the damage done by disappearances. In Laura Bible and Ashley Freeman's cases, this is also true, but both figuratively and literally. Figuratively, because you will hear from Laura's mother who has had to reassemble her life after the disappearance, working hard to be a mother to her other child while keeping Laura's name in the news. She has had to rise from the ashes to continue forward the last 18 years. But also literally, because too many people in the Welch area continue to believe that Laura and Ashley died in that fire, that they themselves became ashes. Well, today, Unfound hopes to resurrect this case by showing that these two young women escaped the fire and were taken away by its initiators. And now a summary of the case. This is brought to you by my friend Megan Goodsite, charlieproject.org. And may I say, the disappearances of Laura Bible and Ashley Freeman, their pages, are two of the longest on that site. Laura Bible planned to spend the night at Ashley Freeman's house December 30th, 1999. At 6 a.m. the next morning, December 31st, a passing motorist noticed a fire in the vicinity of the Freeman's house. After putting out the blaze, authorities discovered Kathy Freeman's remains. She had been shot, but could find no other bodies in the collapsed house. This left the police to believe that Danny Freeman, Ashley's father, had murdered his wife and taken off with the two girls, despite all vehicles being accounted for in the driveway, including Laura's. The day after, January 1st, 2000, Jay and Lorene Bible, while going through the burned-down house by themselves, discovered the body of Danny Freeman. He was burned just like his wife and had taken a shotgun blast directly to the face. Still, the bodies of Laura and Ashley were not found. In fact, no trace of them, not even the clothes they were wearing on December 30th, were located. Eventually, the fire department determined the fire had been intentionally set in an effort to cover up the murders of Danny and Kathy. Police continue to work the case despite many believing Ashley and Laura were essentially cremated in the fire. Since the beginning of 2000, various rumors have circulated regarding the deaths of Danny and Kathy and the disappearances of Laura and Ashley. They range from a drug deal gone wrong to the girls murdering Ashley's parents and taking off. The Freeman family believes the police may have had something to do with the entire crime due to a beef Danny had concerning his son Shane being shot and killed by local cops the year before. The final report determined it was suicide by cop. Since 1999, there have been no sightings of either Laura or Ashley. The interview for this episode is with Laura's mother, Lauria Bible. Unfound News. Unfound now has a Patreon account. The first tier, the Hardy Boys level, is only $2 per month. It's low cost because I want to make sure everyone and anyone has an opportunity to be a part of the success of the program. Shout outs to Andrea, Cameron, Joelle, Sinead, Cambo, Barb, and Amy, who were the first to contribute. More levels are in the works, including access to a private blog and one-on-one discussions with me. Please look for those editions. Also, within the next week, please be looking for the pre-order site on Amazon for the first of the Unfound books. You will be able to buy the ebook for $1.99 during this time. Once the book is available, the price will go up to $2.99. As for the print edition, that's going to take a little longer to put together for obvious reasons, but I hope to have it done by the end of October. Finally, I hope you enjoyed my interview with Ariel Jane from Murder Under the Midnight Sun. Only she and I will know the technical issues we had putting that show together, but it was well worth it. Where you can find Unfound. On Facebook, the Unfound Podcast Discussion Group. On Twitter, at Unfound Podcast. On Instagram, at Unfound Podcast. On YouTube, the Unfound Podcast channel. The email address is unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. You can subscribe at Podomatic, iTunes, Stitcher, and now Google Play. You can also find Unfound on TuneIn Radio, still working on the Spotify location. And please mention Unfound at WebSleuth, Reddit, podcasts we listen to, the Facebook page True Crime Podcasts, and all other true crime websites and forums. I'm very fortunate to have on this episode of Unfound the mother of Laura Bible, Lorene Bible. Lorene, welcome to Unfound.
Thank you.
Tell the listeners a little bit about your daughter Laura, and I'd love for you to start with the unique spelling of her name. Tell the listeners about that, please.
Okay, when I was a young person, I always watched the Little House on the Prairie, and Laura Ingalls Wilder was on there, and I always liked the name Laura. But I wanted her name to be different, so I put an I in Laura's name to just make it different. And then when she got to be about 10, 11, 12 years old, she asked me why I put the I in there, and I told her the story because I used to watch Little House on the Prairie and the reruns she got to see. And she said, well, I don't like the I in it. And I said, well, why don't you like the I? And she said, well, Mom, you can go to like Walmart or Kmart or little convenience stores and you can always find Laura, but you can't find the way you spelled my name. If you hadn't done it, then I could just go pick up stuff with my name on it. Now we have to order everything. So I never thought about that when I named her Laura with an I. So my niece and nephew, after Laura disappeared, they had a little girl and they wanted to name her after Laura. And I said, oh, that's fine. You know, we thought that was great. It would be a blessing to have somebody named after Laura, but I told them they couldn't put the I in it. And they said, well, we don't want to upset you. And I had to let my nephew and his wife know that it wouldn't upset me, but when she would get older, she would learn to not like her name spelled with an I. For the same reason Laura didn't like it. You can't go by your name on personal pencils and notebooks and stuff like that. So their little girl now is a teenager, and now she knows why. She likes her name, Laura, because you can go to any store or, you know, convenience stores and stuff, and you can buy little things with your name on it.
Sure, just like they have those Coke bottles now with people's names on them. Something like that.
Yes.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I just had to ask you because I'm sure there are many listeners who know about your daughter's case, or maybe you're just hearing about it for the first time and are looking at her first name, and I'm sure they're like, well, that's an unusual spelling of the name, but you just say Laura, so I thought the listeners should know about that. Thank you. What are some of your memories about Laura? What would what should they know about your daughter and her interest and who she was as a young woman?
Well, as a young woman in school, she was 16 when she disappeared, and she was a cheerleader. She was on the National Honor Society. She basically loved school. She was, you know, very outgoing. She would speak her mind. When there was something that would upset her, she would tell people. that she just didn't go along with the regular crowd. It didn't bother her to be one off. Her interest, like I said, she was in FFA and 4-H, where she showed animals and stuff like that, because we do live in the country, and that's just something the kids in our area, a lot of them are in the FFA. And then she, to raise money, she would babysit for people. She loved little children, loved to babysit them. She would have her suitcase, and in it was her babysitting suitcase, and she would take videos and color crayons and coloring books and stuff like that with her, so she could occupy the kids' time when she was with them.
And so it sounds to me like then she was fairly popular. She was a very popular girl, popular student. I usually equate that with being in cheerleading. She had a lot of friends.
Yes, in her class, in her sophomore class, there were 12 girls, and they started out together from kindergarten and come all the way through to 10th grade. So those 12 girls were very nice, close-knit girls.
And
when
was
you would have
please,
I'm sorry.
please continue.
When you would have a birthday party, it was the same 12 girls going to each party as they were growing up.
I suppose, all those years, the whole way up through their 10 years, at least, they would know each other pretty well by that time, wouldn't they?
Yes.
And was Ashley Freeman one of these girls as well?
Well, Ashley started out at Blue Jacket with Laura when they were in kindergarten. And then when she became a sixth grader, because she lived across the section from us, about a mile across the section from us. And when she became a sixth grader, her and her parents and brother moved 14 miles straight north of where she lived when she was started school. But by then, she was in the Welch school district. So, but the same way, the girls, even though the schools are 5 miles apart from Blue Jacket to Welch, but they all stayed in contact with one another, and a lot of things like basketball games and stuff like that, bands, parades and stuff like that, the towns did them in each town. So it was still, even though she'd moved away to another school district, she was still where she could, meet with Laura, and she stayed the night and stuff like that at our house.
So at the time, what you're saying is at the time of Ashley and Laura's disappearance, they did not go, they were close friends, but they were not in the same school together. They were not in the same class.
Yes, they were in two different schools. Laura went to Blue Jacket, and Ashley was at Welch.
And they met, like you said, going back to elementary school. Being that Ashley is, of course, a part of this disappearance as well, maybe you could quickly give the listeners your impression of her as well.
Same way, very active. She was in the National Honor Society, had good grades. She played on the basketball team for Welch. She knew a lot of people. She was very well known with the students out of Welch. She had friends out of Welch as well as out of Blue Jacket. She was in FFA for her sophomore year. She was in band. Basically, her and Laura was basically the same as far as, knowing people, activity, involvement in school and church.
And so you liked Ashley. It sounds to me like you liked her and you thought she was a positive influence on your daughter.
Oh, yes.
Okay. I have to ask you this, being that this is eventually where the disappearance happened, but what did you know about Ashley's parents at the time? What did you know about the rest of her family?
Now, as far as Kathy, I've known her all my life. We went to school together when we were in Veneta, when we were growing up. And at one point, Ashley and I were related by marriage. But the same way, very nice young lady. Always, she worked to help support her family. And when the kids were all little, there wasn't nothing she would do for her children.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Denny, I didn't personally know him as I know him now. I tell people that when your kids go to somebody else's house, you might know the kid and you might be acquainted with their parents. So when something like this happens, you make it your business to go find everything out
Yeah.
about that family.
Right.
And that's when you find out, you know, there's things in other people's lives you don't even know about. On the surface,
Yeah.
they seem like they're a real nice family. But then you go learn about some of the things and you think, oh my.
Yeah. And we're going to get into that. Can you explain, maybe even to me too, and not just the listeners, this kind of simple existence that the Freemans had to have? Had Laura been over there before? Did you know that maybe they didn't have electricity and running water? They seemed to live like as if they were up in like northern Alaska or somewhere.
Well, no, they had electricity.
Oh, they did. Okay.
Yes, they did. And they had a well. Because in some places out in the rural communities, a lot of people don't have the rural water. They dig wells, and that's how you do your house from a well. And they had a wood burning stove. When they lived across the section from us, a mile across, when they were little, when Ashley was little, they had water, they had electric, they had propane and all that. But once you go up, further areas that don't have the real water, people have dug wells.
Okay. And how many times over the years do you think that Laura had gone over to Ashley's house, maybe stayed over, or hung out for the day? How many times do you think that happened? And did
I
she ever
mean,
say anything about anything strange that ever she ever saw over there?
no, she never, but she didn't go there for that long of a period. If she went and stayed overnight, she'd go in the evening and she'd be back the next day.
And she
So
never had any problems over there, and like we're gonna find out, maybe specifically with Danny, never any problems like that. And
no, never nothing like that. No.
so we move up to December 30th, 1999. Um, what do you know about that day, what Laura and Ashley did, and what were their movements that day that eventually took them back to the Freeman's house?
Okay, well, on the Wednesday, the 29th in 99 was the day Ashley turned 16 on the 29th of December. Ashley had come to our house on the 27th, on Monday evening, the 27th. Steve stayed in my house Monday night, Tuesday night, and the girls got up and drove because by that time Laura had her driver's license, and we only allowed her to drive during the day. She could not drive her car by herself at night. So then they went to Ashley's house. Actually, they got to Ashley's house so she comes Sunday night and Monday. And Tuesday afternoon, her and Laura drove to Ashley's, which, if you go from my house to their house, it's 13 miles straight north. You didn't have
Okay.
to drive around creeks and stuff.
Okay.
And she stayed Tuesday night. They were going to get up Wednesday morning on Ashley's 16th birthday on the 29th and take her to town, take her out to eat, take her out shopping to Walmart, and then go see her grandma Celeste, who lived outside of Anita, back south of town. And then they were going to come home, and Laura was supposed to be home by dark on the 29th. Unfortunately, so the night of the 28th, nothing happened. Go spend the night, you get up, you go to town, you come back. But they didn't leave Welch, which is 17 miles from Bonita, till like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Because they slept in, and by the time they got chores done and just got around, it was later in the day. So they took her out to eat, to Pizza Hut. Then they took her to Walmart, where Laura was going to buy her a birthday present. And then they went to her grandma's. by this time in December, it gets dark really quick. Like 5 o'clock, 5:30, it's dark.
Sure.
So they knew that we did not allow Laura to drive at night. So Kathy asked Laura, she said, well, on the way back through, let's go by your mom and dad's house and see if they'll let you stay one more night because it's dark. And one of, they're both going to have to drive to Welch in order for one of them to ride back home with you.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's one more night, she comes in, her dad asked her where her car was, and she said, well, it's still at Danny and Kathy's. She said, we got late, going to town to take Ashley out for her birthday, and Kathy wants to know if I can just stay another night and drive home in the morning. Again, what's one more night?
Right. And this is during from school, like from Christmas vacation, so there's no school involved at this time either.
Yeah, there's no school involved. It's Christmas vacation.
Okay.
And when Laura, he tells her, okay, go ahead. Your mom will be here in a minute. By that time I was pulling in. She said, I'm going to just stay another night. And I told her to make sure she got home by 8 because we had dentist appointments on the 30th at 9 o'clock. And, so they left and went towards Welch, went back over to Highway 2, which is the highway that goes from Veneta to Welch, and stopped at a place called Jack's, a little convenience store that was on one of the corners there in Welch, and was buying some pop and milk. And there's where the young man that Ashley was seeing at the time, he was there because his grandma ran that grocery store or that little convenience store. And they invited him to go out to the Freeman to eat birthday cake and ice cream with them.
Makes sense.
And they went on, and went up to the Freemans. And by 10 o'clock, he left by 10 o'clock.
So he wasn't going to stay the night. The parents, I guess, weren't going to allow him to stay the night, but he was.
Oh, no,
he just left.
No. He was just invited to eat cake and ice cream and leave.
Okay.
Because he was back in Veneta by 17 after 10 when he was sitting back on Main Street talking to his friends.
Okay. So,
and sometime after that is when somebody come in there, shot Kathy, shot Danny, and abducted both the girls.
Now, when did you first find out that something happened at the Freemans the night before? Where were you? I know this is very painful. I know, but I think it's important. Do you remember how you found out? Why you found out? Why you found out?
Well, at that time, I worked for fast food in Veneta on the corner of Veneta, and I had always told people that I worked so much because I worked for an owner-operator just as I do with my job now. And I tried calling a couple of times just to say, hey, make sure you're home by 8. But I wouldn't get, it would just ring and ring and ring. But I just thought they're not hearing it or they've already left the home. But I had a sheriff's deputy come into the place where I was working and said, Lorene, I need to talk to you. And I said, see, guys, he's come to take me away from here. I don't need Calgon. I just need the sheriff's department to take me away from you guys. Mm-hmm. And he says, I really need to talk to you. So I said, okay, let's come back to my office, which was a little bitty office, no bigger than the front seat of a car or a truck. And he asked me if I knew Ashley Freeman. I said, yes, that's my daughter's best friend, and she stayed the night with them the last 2 nights. I said, but she's supposed to be coming to town, home, pick up her brother, and we have dentist appointment. But my son had called me about 10 minutes before he got there and stated that his girlfriend that lives in Welch had heard that the Freeman's house was on fire. So he was leaving to go to see if he could help him do anything, not knowing that it's already burnt to the ground.
Okay.
That they've already found one body in the fire. But I tell the sheriff deputy that, he's on his way, and they're like, and I could tell by the expression of his face something was wrong. And I said, what's wrong? And he said, do you know the layout of that trailer house? I said, yes, I do. When you walk in the front door, you walk into where the heating stove is. To the right is the living room. To the left is Danny and Kathy's bedroom. Then you go into, because they build on to this trailer. When you walk on in, you walk into the kitchen area. You go to the right to a bedroom, and you go down the hallway to the bathroom, and down at the end of that hall was the bedroom where Ashley slept. And I said, well, how bad is it? And he said, and again, the look on his face, he's like, the house is a total loss. And I said, is everybody okay? He says, we found one body. I said, where was it at? And he said, it was in that front bedroom. I said, well, that's Kathy's bedroom. I said, have you found the girl? And at that point, he said, well, thanks for your help. And he was talking on his walkie-talkie back to the people at the place, because cell phone service in that area, you have to go like 1.5 miles to 2 miles away to get cell service back then.
Yeah.
And he said, I'll keep you informed. And he left where I was at. I called my husband. He left because he works down at the lake at a parts store. I said, you need to get here, and you need to get here now. So it took him about 15 minutes to drive from the lake back to Veneta, and then we went to the Freemans. When we got there, we were told to stay 1,000. They had this big do not cross sign 1,000 foot from the trailer.
And you could see the trailer from where you were, though, right?
Well, the barn where it had burnt.
Yeah.
And I kept asking them, why are people, at this time, people were sitting around. The sheriff's department and some of the fire department was just standing around. Nobody was looking for two young girls and Danny, And we were told at that time, the minute they found the body laying over the bed, they immediately called the OSBI in. So they wasn't letting anybody into the scene till the OSBI come.
And that's like the Oklahoma State Police or something like that?
Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation.
Okay.
Yes.
And that probably had to make you a little suspicious. If this was just a fire, why are they calling them in? Maybe.
Well, previously, a year, January 9th, the first of the year, the Freemans, they had a son older than Ashley. And there was problems within the family. He was taken out of the home, and he was told he had to go back home. And he told his parents he wouldn't go home. And he took a vehicle, went to McAllister, Oklahoma, stole another vehicle, and drove back here. And he was shot and killed by the county deputies.
So right in the area where you live, that area of Welch, Oklahoma, and where you live now, he was stopped somewhere there, and one of these local cops, they had a confrontation. The cop shot him dead.
Actually, it was 7 miles from his house up at Welch.
Okay.
He was west of his house by 7 miles. But he told his friends he's either going to commit suicide or he'd do suicide by cop before he'd go home. And 2 days before he was shot, the day before he was shot and killed, he had went into my home, fixing, because he'd been on the run for like 3 days because of stealing these vehicles and stuff. And he took a rifle, a pistol, enough ammunition to have held off several law enforcement if he wanted to. Took a bath, took a shower, took some clothes, took some blankets, took himself pizza and chicken strips, rented movies on my TV. That's what time I know he got there and when he left. And when Laura and Brad come home from school, Laura went upstairs because my son's girlfriend's birthday, and he wanted to send her roses to school. and the where she had her money, the money was gone. And when she come downstairs, because we live in a two-story house, when she come downstairs, she noticed that over by the cook stove, this young man had used my Christmas china I had out on my dining room table. He'd used it to put his pizza and these chicken strips and had grease everywhere.
But at the time, you didn't know it was him, did you? You
At the
didn't.
time, I did not know it was Shane Freeman, but we called the sheriff department. They come out. We told them what we'd seen. They looked around, took pictures, and then they asked us, "Do you know Shane Freeman?" Because him and his little buddies had been going to people's homes that he knew and was taking stuff. And they would like pop machines that are like outside convenience stores and stuff. They would like break into them.
And he was shot dead by this cop. How long before your daughter and Ashley disappeared? How long was this before
Well,
that?
that was January 9th, and this was December the 30th of the same year.
So almost a year late. Almost. It was within the
Yeah.
same year, but almost a year later that
Yeah.
happened. And so what you're saying is when Shane, it was his name, when he was shot by this cop, he actually had some weapons on him that he actually stole from your house.
Yes.
Oh, my.
Yeah, he had a pistol that was found because the truck that he took from Muskogee or McAllister and drove back here, the tie rod broke in it when he was over there by his parents' house. And one of the neighbors that knew him said, "Hey, Shane, you need some help?" And he said, "No." Well, by then, everybody in the neighborhood had already knew that, Shane had taken his grandparents' truck, took it to McAllister, it broke down, and he had stolen a truck, but they didn't know where he was at. So Shane knew that older neighbor, was going to call the cops.
And
when
so
when the sheriff's deputy got there, he told Shane, "Go ahead and get out of the car, get out of that truck," because he was driving a truck. And the sheriff's deputy says Shane had the pistol in his hand. And he said, "Son, you have not done anything to cause you to be in much trouble. You're in trouble, but not much trouble, you know." And when he shot, Shane turned, and when the bullet, because he meant to hit him in the shoulder, but when Shane turned, he raised his arm up, and the bullet entered his left side, and then it ricocheted, and he ran behind the truck and fell. And that's where they found the pistol, and that's where Shane was. But because the bullet went in and ricocheted, that's what killed him.
And so getting back to the reason that the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation got involved was because the Freemans had problems with the cops after this point that their son was killed. And so that's the reason the OSBI came in. OSBI came in.
Because for almost a year, there was tit for tat between Danny and the sheriff's department.
Okay. Neither of them trusting each other. The Freemans probably thought that their son was killed for no reason. There was some conspiracy. And then the cops were saying, well, this was a justified shooting. He pulled a gun on Common.
Right. It was ruled by the OSBI and everybody that looked at the case that it was, suicide by cop. It was justified.
Okay.
But the Freemans was trying to. They filed a wrongful death suit against the county. To get it to go to court, they had to have everything done by the 9th of January of 2000 in order to do it. Everybody up to that point had turned them down and said, "You do not have a case." But they had talked to somebody right before Christmas, and they told them, "You bring us your evidence, we'll look into it, but you got to pay us X amount of money, and then we'll let you know by the 9th of January if you've got a case." But for a year, Danny would go harass the sheriff's department, and they would come and harass the Freemans.
And so this house was burnt down. The Freeman home was burnt down, and not too long before this deadline was to occur.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
And it's been said that by the Freemans that Danny had told everybody, if anything happens to me and Kathy and Ashley, you guys need to look at the cops.
Okay, so we have this totally hanging over this fire at the Freeman residence. And what did the OSBI find when they came in? And then of course, you and your husband found something the day after that. Tell the listeners all about that, please.
Yeah, well, because of the year-long squabble, the sheriff department sat down and said, we ain't touching nothing, called in OSBI, so the Freeman's family can't say anything more bad about them. OSBI comes in, the head investigator's name is Steve Nutter. He comes in, he looks through, he looks at the body that's laying across the bed. They kind of look around a little bit, and they call the county coroner. By this time, Steve Nutter walks down to where my husband and us are, and we said, nobody's even searched the property. If this house was on fire, maybe the girls are laying somewhere around on this 40-acre, or have, went down to the creek or something. Then they allowed my husband and Danny's stepbrother to go look. And we wait for the county coroner. County coroner got there at 3 o'clock. She looks at the body. They put her, in the body bag.
And who was it?
Well, at that point, I knew it was Kathy.
Mm-hmm.
But at that point, they were saying it was a female body. Now, the county coroner, I've known her because she was my parents' physician. She did come over and tell me that it was that of an older woman, and there was a ring on her left hand. There was a wedding band on, and she said it was someone that had given birth to children. She could tell that just by looking at what was left of Kathy's body.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew that was Kathy. Okay, where's Danny and where's the 2 girls? And I asked Steve Nutter, I said, have they looked? Well, by this time throughout the day, while we're waiting, more OSBI agent shows up. They tell us they're experts. We're experts at our job. Well, you tell me then. This fire happened at 3 to 5 in the morning. There should be 4 bodies in that fire. How do you know there's no more bodies? You haven't moved anything. Their whole thing is we looked. We're 100% sure there's no more bodies in that fire.
And so that would be Danny's body's missing, Laura's body's missing, Ashley could not be found allegedly could not be found in the charred remains of this house.
Right. And remember, it's a trailer house. They don't take much to burn a trailer house. Right. And when stuff burns, it burns through and it drops through to the ground. Because it was up about 1.5 to 2 foot off the ground. The only thing remaining was a little bit of a floor that I would say was a little more like 5 by 8. Danny and Kathy had a waterbed. And that piece of that floor that waterbed was on, when the fire happened, it would dribble down so the water would come out of that waterbed, and that's the only reason that floor didn't burn.
So eventually what happened the rest of the day, they kind of just said, well, that's all we can find. And I mean, it's leave you.
By this time, it's dark. By the time, it's 3 o'clock, by the time the county coroner, they do a quick, what they say, we've looked all day, but let's look again. Okay, it's 5 o'clock, it's pitch black. They turn the scene back over to the families. And they say, we need you to go to Veneta and we need to talk to each of the different families by themselves. And then we'll tell you what we're going to do to find Danny, Ashley, and Laura. So it's pitch black, and I mean, there's no moon. When I tell people there's the black of the moon, they're like, what do you mean the dark of the moon? What's the dark of the moon? It's pitch black. Like you'd turn your lights out, and there's no light. It was that dark. So
were you thinking at that time that Danny might have run off with his daughter and Laura? Was that going through your mind at this time?
At that time, I was not.
Okay.
Where could, because to me, they should have been in that fire.
Okay.
I mean, I said that over and over, just like I'm talking to you. Mm-hmm. Those girls and Danny should be in this fire. That's why when they said, we can't find them, we're sure they're not here, I said, you've got to be kidding me. So at that time, then we went to Bonita. They talked to everybody, and the only thing they were asking us, because they took my husband in one room, me in another. Somebody went and talked to my son, which he didn't know a lot. Then they talked to Dwayne by himself and Celeste, who is Kathy's mother, by herself. And all they want to know, did Danny and Kathy fight? Did they have enemies? Who would have done this? What would have happened in the family to cause Kathy to get shot and nobody there?
So just to be clear, there was a fire, but the coroner only had the one body of Kathy Freeman. But what this coroner found was that actually she didn't technically die of the fire; she was actually shot.
She was shot in the back of the head, which they were not telling us.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that because somebody that was up there that I personally know said Kathy had been shot from behind. And I knew that, So we go in, all they want to know, is the relationship between Danny and Kathy. Was it good? Was he angry? Well, I can tell you what I know. I know that when they lived across the section from us, that he would, he grew his own marijuana.
He grew his own marijuana. Okay.
He had what do you call those?
Grow house?
Houses?
Yeah.
Greenhouses? Yeah, mm-hmm. Greenhouse. So he would do it outside, and then, when they moved to Welch, he would grow it around his 40 acres in spots that couldn't be spotted from the air. But I didn't know as much as I know now. He had a partner, him here, and one in Kansas. So that if anything ever got caught, they'd still have marijuana to sell.
I see.
And then when they still lived by us, Denny had a black powder gun go off in his face and had to have a metal plate. So when he would get mad, he would escalate and get mad.
So maybe something having to do with that injury affected his mental stability.
Yes, because the reason Shane did not live with them from like October-ish and was told to go home was Danny beat Shane bad enough that when Shane went to school, his first hour was basketball. And when the coach saw his legs and the blood running out of his legs and the back of his back, the coach is the one that called DHS for child abuse. And then he was arrested for child abuse. Shane was taken out of the home, and, all that took place. And then they said, okay, we're doing family counseling. Shane, you got to go home. But they said that when Danny would get mad, and he got real mad because of the injury he sustained, he would just go overboard.
And you were telling on the day after this fire, or the day of this fire happening, that's what you told the investigators when they asked you about this.
Yeah, well, somebody had already told them. I mean, They had talked to several people, and they said they already knew, due to the OSBI already knew of Shane's death because they had investigated it. They knew about Denny's stuff, and they said, would he have gotten so mad that he would have killed Kathy and took the girls? And I said, what are you talking about? Well, come to find out, sometime on Thursday, somebody called in a tip stating that they had saw Danny and the two girls in a white Ford truck, and he had told them, quote, that he was over where the Freemans used to live when they were all kids, like 3 miles from where Danny lived, that he would trade the two girls for the deputy that shot Shane.
Wow.
Now, I didn't find that out till like 10:30 at night by this time, on the 30th. Knowing that all those people knew that all day. So that's why they wanted to hurry up, because in their minds, Danny's over here.
Yes, of course.
And he's got the girls. And then when I found out, I said, then why in the Blue Blazes, did we not go over 3 miles and look at the old Freeman's old place? Well, we had to, make sure that there wasn't anybody's in the scene. We're going to go there first thing in the morning.
Mm. Now, I need to ask you a question. Were there any vehicles missing from the Freeman residence? Obviously, Laura's vehicle's there. That's why she went back there in the first place. But were any of their vehicles missing?
No, they're all there. Kathy's car, Danny's truck, Laura's car.
Okay.
Laura's car's got her key. Her car has her keys in them.
Huh.
Because at that time, you didn't think people would come and take stuff like they do now. But we left her keys in it. Her keys was in her car. They even didn't, while they were waiting, they even didn't go search any of the vehicles in case somebody had put body, shot somebody and put them in the trunks of those 2 cars.
So
Danny
there was this tip
underneath.
So there was this tip that Danny was out there with your daughter and Ashley, but on the other hand, all the vehicles that the Freemans owned were still at the house.
Yes. But the OSBI agent decided that was, somehow he'd come up with a white Ford truck.
All right.
So we finally get home by 12:30, 1 o'clock. By that time, the person, I find out who called in the tip, and I called them up on the phone and said, how do you get that you saw Danny and the 2 girls? Well, I'm almost positive. You said you talked to him. You're the one that told the sheriff's department. Well, by then that man was getting so much pressure from us and Dwayne and the Freeman side. If you saw him and talked to him, where was he at? And what did he say? It's still pitch black, but that night, my son, a friend of ours, and another person, as well as Dwayne, they're out there around the Freemans and around where this Freemans lived years ago, just park and see if they can see anybody coming and going, because at daybreak, we're going to go to these places. So at daybreak, we meet Dwayne in Welch. By this time, the land that the Freemans owned when they were little, when the kids were all little, had been sold to Mr. Mike Brown. He calls up Mike Brown, and he tells Dwayne, I have a man and his son staying over there with a camper on the side of this old house. They're hunting. They've been there for 7 days because it's hunting season. It's deer season.
Mm-hmm.
And up in our area of the woods, people are hunting. And he said, that's what it is. And they drive a white Ford truck. So when we meet Dwayne, he's just going to drive over there and just check and make sure that he knows who it is. So Jay and I tell him we're going to go up to the Freemans. And we're going to personally search every inch of that trailer. So it's 6 a.m., it's daybreak, and Jay and I step over into the burn, which at this time, when we're talking burn, you have to step over where the axles are on that trailer house, and you step down to the ground, because those floors in the front of that trailer are not even there. They've been burnt, and everything in the house is on the ground. And he's looking, we're looking, and we look up on that floor that's left. And Jay, Danny had a Rottweiler dog. He's up there laying on the wood floor. He gets up and comes down there where we are. And we say, hey, bud, what are you doing here? And about that time, Jay looks up and he said, Lorene, you need to go call the sheriff's department and tell them to get back out there. I said, why? And he said, come here. So by that time, we get up on that little floor, and there's the body of a man that laying straight up, but he has no face. His face, he had been shot at close range. He had no face.
So those investigators were there the day before. They said they went through the house and said they couldn't find anything. You and your husband show up the next morning as soon as daylight breaks and the sun comes up, and you find Danny Freeman dead in his, this burned down trailer, and he'd been shot in the face.
And he was in the same bedroom as they found Kathy, except Kathy was laying over the bed. His feet was touching the waterbed, and his shoulders was out the door as you walk in. He had marks on his body from the boots that the OSBI agent wore.
They walked right over him and allegedly did not see him.
Yep. On day 2, the reason they said they didn't find him the days before, because the piles of debris were too high the day before, and overnight with the dampness and the dew, everything settled. That made it where you could find him.
What'd you think when you saw? I mean, I know that had to. I know that this is horrible. What did you have to think at that point? Obviously, at that point, you knew that he had not taken your daughter and his daughter. That he was there. He was right there, dead and shot. Not just dead, but shot. I mean, did you think probably that you were going to find your daughter and Ashley's body in there eventually as well?
Well, that's what we thought. I mean, at that point, when I went 2 miles up the road, called the sheriff, called 911, told them who I was, and that they needed to send the sheriff's department back out to the Freeman. And I was asked why. I said, well, they said there was no bodies left in the fire. There's a body. How do you know that? It's a man. How do you know that? You can see his genitals. Oh, okay. Well, hang tight. They sent the officer that come there and talked to me at my job the day before. Was the officer they sent out. They told him not to get on his car radio where it could be picked up by police scanners, for people at home, and said, when you tell us, all we want you to tell us is what you were sent there to do, yes or no. So when he gets there, we're up there around the bodies. By this time, Dwayne's back, my son, and his friends are back. And I tell Dwayne, well, don't worry about going finding Danny, because he's laying up here on this floor. And he says, he's what? He's been here all night. He's dead. He has no face. And he says, I said, I've already called the sheriff's department. The sheriff's deputy they sent out looked. And he said, and they're supposed to be the experts. He went back to his car, got on his car radio, and said, what I was sent here, the answer is yes. So it's like, would you repeat that again? What I was sent here to do is yes. Within 40 minutes, the OSBI was there, and by this time, they brought a lot of OSBI agents. And the sheriff's department. They told us we had to get away from the house. By this time, my husband's in their face. He said, yesterday, you kept us 1,000 foot down the yards down the road. Today, I'm going to stay right where I'm at. I'm going to be in your back pocket. No, I'm going to be in your front pockets. And we're going to see if those 2 girls are here also.
Yeah, of course.
Well, and by then it was the stuttering, well, we don't know really what happened. I said, no, you told us. And by this time, the agents that had spoke to us all individually was with Steve Nether, the head agent. You told us. I looked at the lady that talked to me. I said, you told me you were 100% sure. You told me at 9:30 last night you were 100% sure that there was no bodies in that fire. When you asked me, you're her mom, what do you think she is? I said, it's a fire. It's, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. Her body should have been in that dead fire. She should have been found.
Oh.
Well, there's no bodies there. I said, now looky, right here. Danny Freeman's in this fire. Been here all night. You put us through thinking that Danny had the 2 girls captive over here 3, 4 miles from here, and he was going to trade. Nobody even went and found that to find out it was a mistake. Well, we're here, we're going to do our jobs. I said, no, you're not. You release this thing to the families. We'll let you help us take care of this thing today, just because we need police here when we're doing this. Well, we're going to do it. You can't. I said, you excuse me. Steve Nutter, did you or did you not turn this scene over to Dwayne and Jay? Well, yes, but there's a body in it. You left the body in it. So today, you stand back. We have 150 family members and neighbors in this community that are going to help us take this trailer and everything in it down to the dirt while we make sure those girls aren't underneath anything. And I will not leave till I'm 100% sure that those girls aren't in this fire.
But you didn't find them, did
And
you?
at that point, no. I mean, we literally picked up like the stove, the stuff, the refrigerator, the cook stove, anything like that, and it was handed to people, and we put it in a big stack till we got all the stuff out of there. And then we had people bring in big saws, and we cut the metal of the trailers. And we pulled the trailer apart till we were sitting on ground, on dirt.
And there was nothing.
I mean, at that
And
time,
did you find any signs of Laura at all? And I don't mean any of her remains, but maybe a shirt, pants, shoes, her purse, anything like that. Did you find any of her or anything of hers in the trailer?
yes. When
Okay.
we were on the backside of the trailer, going to the room that Ashley slept in, and that's where Laura would have put. We found her purse. She'd gotten $200 for Christmas, and she took some of the money and bought Ashley a present for her birthday. But her license, all that was in her purse. She took her pajamas she just got for Christmas from her grandparents. We found parts of them. I mean, they'd been burnt, but we found enough that we could put a shirt together. Mm-hmm. So I knew that Laura was not, and it was still folded up on top of some of Ashley's stuff on the dresser. I knew that the girls were not in their night clothes, whoever come in there and took them.
So what you're saying is it sounds like it was a pretty horrible fire, but like you said, this was a trailer home, not a regularly built home. But you're saying that the fire was bad, but her purse was still there. And some of her clothes, which I would think would burn pretty fast, were still there as well. So the fire didn't touch everything. It didn't char everything.
Yeah,
it didn't burn.
Right. It didn't total, because by the time the part that really burnt, whoever did this used gasoline or something. They had put it in front of the wood stove, took it in and took it around the dining room table, and come back into the living room and went between the couch and chair and went around the coffee table. Because when you looked at it, that was where the real dark burn was. Everything else was just a normal burn. It was burnt, but stuff you could still make out stuff. Kind of like if you put a stack of stuff and you burn it, at the very bottom you can find some stuff. And that's what this was.
Now, of course, I was not there. None of the listeners, I'm going to believe, were there. But in your opinion, being that, you were there, you and your husband actually found Danny Freeman's body in the remains of this home. In your opinion, is there any way that your daughter and Ashley could have been burned to the point that they would not have, essentially cremated? Is there any possibility that could have happened in the fire that you saw that day?
Well, I asked that question. There was a retired fire marshal did come out there. He was friends with somebody. And I did ask him that question. I said, I need to ask you a question. He said, Lorene, anything. I said, could this fire have been so hot that it burnt the girls like when you cremate a body? And he looked at me and he said, well, some fires could. And he said, why are you asking me? And I said, I showed him the dark burn. He said, yeah. But he said, Lorene, I'm telling you, nothing on this fire, because you saw Denny's body. He didn't have a face, but he still had his feet. He still had some of the clothes he had on. He had sweatpants on, had a T-shirt with a flannel shirt over it. Now, he was missing his left hand that was in the doorway, which they tell me that it got burned off when the fire happened. Okay. Because that was on the back side of that is the wood stove that they used stuff to make it will burn really good. But he said, if those girls were in here, we would have found. He said, you want to know this? I said, why do you think I'm asking? You tell me. He said, you would have found bodies. You would have found intestines. I said, well, we didn't, because we literally took it to the ground and we got little shakers with screens and we shook stuff just to make sure.
Mm-hmm.
So they asked me about 4 o'clock how much longer I was going to make everybody wait. Because at that time, by 4 o'clock on the 30th, I knew, on the 31st, I knew that those girls were not in that fire. But because the OSBI agents was 100% sure till I got everything clearly gone, pulled the trailer apart and checked the ground, I wasn't going to let them go. Because I didn't want to have people tell me 5 years, 10 years, are you sure they still wasn't in that fire? When I say I'm 100% those girls were not there, I'm 100% sure they are not there.
And I believe you, Lorene. I've read a little bit since we talked the first time about fires and what it takes to burn a human body to completion, like to ashes. And it is in house fires, things we're talking about in this particular episode. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it is so rare. It's not even statistically significant. It is very,
Right.
very rare that happens. If I could ask you a question, you mentioned that the Freeman's dog was still alive. It came into the burned house while you and your husband was there. Your husband was there. Does that surprise you? Was it a house dog? Was it an in-house dog? Was it an outhouse dog?
My thing is that Rottweiler was Danny's. And, when you build that close a relationship, I think that Rottweiler knew Danny was up there because he was laying beside him up on the floor. I don't think during the day he might have got to stay in. I never knew that they let him in the house. But, there's no walls up there. He just got up there and laid down. But he was laying right beside Danny's body.
I guess what I'm asking is, did the Freemans keep their dog inside, or was that a dog they kept outside?
I think it was both.
So whoever did this, I mean, this is a homicide scene. It's a murder scene. You have Kathy, who was obviously shot. You have Danny, who was obviously shot. That's what killed them. It was not the fire; it was the bullets. But their dog was still alive, and in fact, the dog was not inside, I guess, for the fire because it was still living.
Right.
So that's why I felt that I had to ask you that. And then you also said about Laura's purse; it was there. Did you say that the money that she had gotten, it was still in it?
Yes. Yes.
So that would not lead you to believe that whoever did this, that maybe burglary or something like that was a motive. Surely they would have gone through Laura's purse. Surely. And I want to also ask you something about the Freemans. We had talked about the first time we talked that the Freemans had some guns and things like that. Did they have a lot of guns? Do you think that this was something that, as a gun owner, Danny Freeman kept one by his bedside in case there was an intruder? What can you tell the listeners about that and their guns?
Well, when we took the trailer to the ground, we found rifles in the living room, Danny and Kathy's bedroom, kind of like, a lot of people now have like gun safes.
Sure.
Back 20 years ago, people didn't have gun safes, but they had places that they put them in closets and kind of like where the walls would meet, kind of up in the corner, they'd have and then back in Ashley's bedroom, we found guns. We pulled guns out of the house.
Would you say it was less or more than 10?
Oh, it was more than 10.
Easily more than 10.
A lot of people are going to think, boy, he had lots of guns. But from where we are in northern Oklahoma, people hunt. They have a variety of guns. They got, pistols. They got 410s. They got 22 rifles, 22 pistols. And they also have the big rifles to do deer hunting with. So it's nothing for people to have 10 to 15 guns.
I guess what I'm asking is we don't, of course, know, but here he was shot, and I'm just wondering if it must have been some sort of surprise. if he's a gun owner and maybe has a gun near his bed, that he ended up being murdered by, I mean, shot in the face, which means he had to have seen his killer. That, it's a little, so he and his wife must have been very surprised. Somebody broke in there while they were in bed and really surprised them.
I don't think that somebody broke in there. I think somebody come to his house and he let them in, because he had plastic. Like your shoes would be burned off of you, but the plastic is stuck to the bottom of his feet. He was still in jogging pants. He
Okay.
had a white T-shirt and he had a sleeve, kind of like you would just be setting up, or you'd be watching TV and you'd be in your lounge clothes.
Yeah.
So whoever come in there, he either was in bed and he got up and put some clothes on to talk to him, or he was sitting in a chair when they got there at 2:00 in the morning, 3:00. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah, do we have any idea of when this fire might have started? I mean, somebody obviously saw the fire. Do you know the person who saw the fire and called it in? Do you know what
Yes,
time that happened?
yes, yes. They called the people that live. This is going to sound strange, but over where the Freemans lived when they were little, they owned the land next to it. The couple that owns it now, they were on their way to Veneta to work. We had a big prison here in Veneta, and they were on their way to go to work, and they saw these flames. So instead of going their normal way, they kind of like cut across country. So they come in front of Danny and Kathy's, and they could see the flames. Danny and Kathy, when you get to their gate of their house, they live a quarter of a mile back up off the road. So they literally drove all the way up to the house and drove up in front of the house. But by then, the flames were really big.
Right.
So that's when they turned around and went back down a quarter of a mile, and then we had to go 2 miles over to the highway to a neighbor's, because cell phones, they didn't have cell phone then, but cell phone service was nil to none there, to have them call 911 to get the Welch Fire Department out there to come and help with the fire.
Okay, and this would have been about, I've read about 5 in the morning. Is that accurate?
Around 5:20
Okay.
in the morning.
And has anybody ever been able to ascertain when the fire was actually started? Could you do that? Like, did it start at 4 in the morning, 3 in the morning, 1 in the morning? Any
Well,
ideas?
we hear anywhere after 3:30 in the morning.
Okay, so maybe this person who saw this fire, the fire had been raging for about an hour and a half. But like you said, those types of houses, they could go up maybe a little quicker than other kinds.
Well, the front of the house was built on. It was all made of wood. The back of the house, I had the bedroom, the kitchen, the bathroom, and the second bedroom was the old trailer house.
Mm-hmm.
So it could have started, but that's the back half. It burnt the middle down, but stuff around in Ashley's room, the room that would have been Shane's room, you could still depict stuff that didn't get ruined in there.
So then after you did okay, thank you for that. So you did this search, you and all these other people, all your friends, neighbors, even the police might have assisted. You found no trace of Ashley or Laura in this fire. Did the police do anything? Did you set up any searches? Were there any like all points bulletin looking for these girls? Anything like that the police did?
Well, at that point, when we got done, the OSB agent told us that he was going to go back to Veneta to the sheriff's department, and he was going to put the girls on what they call a NCIC, the list that goes all over the nation. We're looking for these people, and these people have been kidnapped or stuff like that. And he said, then we're going to regroup tomorrow, and we'll see where we're going to go. He didn't even have no idea what he was going to do. But at the same time that we were looking through the house, is the same time that another person over in Missouri was captive, and we had about 50 FBI agents over in Missouri. So they knew that if the girls were taken, that they could be, because it's only from Welch to Kansas is only like 17 miles.
Okay, so
So
you had
they
you had a
called.
whole bunch of FBI agents conveniently in the area around the time that this all happened.
Yes. I mean, people say, how'd you get 50 FBI agents to come? I said, well, we didn't. They were over there with this other case that this man abducted this girl and he was on the run, and that's where they found him, was over there in Missouri. Is when the call got put in, hey, these girls have been abducted. They're nowhere around. We need you to come in because with the girls being taken, they could have been taken over the state line, which you have to have the FBI to help do that. But on the 1st, on January 1, while everybody else is worried about the Y2K, computers crashing, or going, to New Year's Eve parties, we were setting up as a family, we set up a grid search on that Saturday. We had people that would come from everywhere. We had probably 500 people walking, on horseback, on ATVs, driving in their cars, and we did grid search of the Freemans, and we went out 10 miles in north, south, east, and west of the Freemans. At the same time, I had a friend that had a Officer Firehouse, and he called and said, if you can give me some pictures of the girls, we'll make up a quick poster right quick so we can send out and people can start posting these girls' pictures everywhere. So I went back to Veneta and he took the pictures and he said, you come back in an hour and I'll have you 500 of these copies ready for you. Well, at that time, I said, okay, while I'm waiting, I'm going to go see if Steve Nutter, the OSBI agent, had got the girls on that NCIC or whatever that national hotline is for all the, law enforcement. So I went to the police station and asked them, and I have a friend that works there, and he went and looked, and he said, Lorene, those girls are not on there. I said, are you sure? Yesterday at 4 o'clock, Steve Nutter said he was getting the girls on there because we'd already lost 24 hours. Took Kathy's body out, and then the next day we took, now we're 48 hours behind. And he said, Lorene, they are not here. I said, how do I get the girls on that link? He said, you got to go to the sheriff's department because it happened in the county. They can put the girls on it. So I had to go make the grandma, Celeste Chandler, go with me to the sheriff's department to sign, because she was, the closest living relative, to sign the papers to put those girls' pictures. When we went back and got the posters, we got back up there. Channel 8 News out of Tulsa was there, and Steve Nutter comes up. Now, all this time, there's not one county deputy, not one OSBI agent, no FBI agent, nobody but the family doing this grid search. Now, we're told by a friend that's in law enforcement that if we found anything, we were just supposed to put stakes, which we got stakes, by it, and then we'd call in law enforcement. When I get back out there about 2 o'clock, Steve Nutter is there. He said, oh, well, what are you all doing? I said, well, we told you yesterday we were going to search this place. How do you know that they're not somewhere? That the girls didn't get shot and they're up here in these woods somewhere. They still didn't bother to come help us search. But he came up just to see if we'd found anything else, because someone said, it's going to be bad if those family members find those 2 girls. Your career will be over.
Yep.
So he comes back, says, did you find anything? We told him, no, we hadn't found anything. There's a couple of things that they called the sheriff's department. They went and looked just in case. And he says, well, we've got the girls' pictures out there on that link, so everybody's known to watch for them. I said, you're lying. And by this time, the Channel 8 News kid that was carrying that camera, I told him, I said, me and him's going to get into it, and I want you to video it.
Okay.
And well, you know, he said, and he said, well, you know, everybody knows about it. And I said, no, they don't. Oh, they do now, but they didn't before 2 o'clock today. Now I put them on there. I said, you are lying. How do you know? I said, I went to Veneta, went to the police station. They looked it up for me. Well, who looked it up? I said, the Veneta police chief looked it up. The girls were not on there. You told me last night you were going to leave and go to the sheriff's department at 4 o'clock. You were going to get the girls on there. We've already lost 48 hours. And you still haven't put the girls out there so people help look for these two girls in somebody's vehicle. He said, well, I said, no, don't worry about it. I did your job. Again. He said, well, how did you get them on there? I said, I forced the grandmother to go and sign the papers for Ashley, and I did Laura. That's how they got on there, not because you did it.
Allow me to ask you a question. Do you think that the reason that he didn't get around it is one of a couple reasons? Do you think that possibly he's thinking that Laura and Ashley did get burned up in the fire and it wasn't worth doing it? Or do you think the police in the back of their minds were thinking that Laura and Ashley might have had something to do with the fire and that's why they couldn't be found? And they...
Well, the first one was he knew the second day when we found Danny and we took the trailer down. He knew the girls wasn't in there. Now, the second one, did Ashley and Laura have something to do with it?
Yeah.
I was told that was a rumor. That was what they were all thinking. And I'm talking OSBI, Sheriff's Department, and when the FBI got here, that was one of the agents that come to my home because I point blank asked him, I need to know what you guys are thinking. He said, why would you ask? I said, do you think Laura and Ashley had anything to do with this? Scenario was maybe Kathy and Danny had got into it and Danny shot Kathy. Well, Laura never shot a gun in her life, in her 16 years. Ashley did. Ashley could kill a buck at 150 yards dead. So the rumor was, what if Ashley saw her dad do something to her mom? They ended up, Kathy getting shot in the back, like she was running from him, shot in the back of the head, and then laid over the bed. Could Ashley have picked up a gun and shot Danny point blank? Now, the Freemans, the grandma was like, you know, and they thought the girls had something to do with it. It's going to be part of that. You know, is that. But when I asked the FBI agent, I said, do you think the girls did it? He said, why would you, a mother of a missing girl, ask that? I said, I need to know, how hard do I have to fight to bring these girls home? My daughter, her very best friend. He said, well, I will tell you, it was a theory. Because we had been told by everybody they'd already talked to that Ashley could kill a buck. She'd killed a buck deer dead that, like, November, when gun season started, at 150 yards. But he says, if the girls had done it, number one, Laura would have took her purse. She'd had her money.
Of course.
She'd got in her car with the key still in it, and those girls would have drove to your house or drove to somebody that Ashley knew.
Yeah.
But Laura's car's there, the keys are in it, you found her purse. Those girls were taken from there.
Was it ever determined it was this gasoline or whatever it was used to start this fire? Anybody have an idea? Was that gasoline that could have been on the property at the time, or would somebody had to have brought it there to start this fire? Do you know?
Well, outside the front door, Danny, because it's wintertime, they cut wood. There's chainsaws, and everybody has a little jug of gasoline. And it was all outside the front door.
So if somebody was there and something happened, and they could have suddenly determined, you know what, I need to cover this up, and oh, here's some gasoline, I'll just set the whole thing on fire, in contrast to somebody pre-planning this and bringing the gasoline with them to the Freeman residence.
Right. Well, it's like, you know, maybe they didn't go there to shoot Danny and Kathy, but they went there and whatever happened escalated, Kathy gets shot. They shoot Danny, not knowing that the girls are there. That the girls are in that back bedroom. They come out. They hear gunshot. What do you do with two 16-year-old girls? That you don't know there, and it's done too late. Let's just take them. Let's burn the house down, because they tried to make it look like the wood stove caught the trailer on fire. It would buy them, whoever did it, more time to get away and, do something, which worked, because, that was the 30th, the 31st, we had to find Danny. The 1st of January, we do the grid search. I mean, there's 3 days. You can be anywhere in 48 hours, let alone 72.
Sure. But you did this grid search, and if I may say, since the beginning of the year 2000, there haven't really been any leads in this case, have there?
No.
I mean, ones that you believe. I mean, there's been a couple other leads, but not ones you necessarily believe in, and I want to talk about them in a moment. But nothing substantial, nothing of Laura's was ever found anywhere, her ID anywhere, or anything of Ashley's found anywhere. There was no sightings of them, anything like that.
Oh, we've had, people in Florida. I faced all the girls. We told law enforcement, called law enforcement in those areas. They sent people, but it wasn't the girls. It's just a blonde-haired girl and a brown-haired girl.
I need to ask you about something else, and this has to do with Ashley and some money that she might have had that she was saving. Was that money ever found? Do you think that was something that's real, that she was saving money for a car? I'd read something about it. We had talked about it in our previous conversation. Could that have been a motive? And I guess being that very early in this conversation, we talked about Ashley, and she had this boyfriend that she happened to see the night before. Could it be that he told somebody about this money that Ashley had? Anything like that? What do you think about that?
Well, the story from the Freemans that Ashley had money that she'd been saving, where she'd been working, and that she had to put in a big glass jar or a plastic jug, and it was in the freezer, which there was no jug in the freezer. I can tell you, when Ashley was at my house, because she wanted to buy a car, is what Ashley wanted to do. When Ashley was at our house before the fire happened, we talked about her getting a car. And the debate between her and her dad is, Laura had a Chevy car. The Freemans all drove Toyotas, because then he could work on them. But Ashley was wanting to get something different than a Toyota. Her daddy didn't want her to. But she said, well, it's going to be a while, because I have to get enough money to buy a car. So I think how they got that, Ashley had this $4,000 stuck, because she was working 1 day a week at the other convenience store in Welch. There was two catty cornered across the corner from each other. But she worked 1 day a week because she played basketball. She's very active in school and sports. So, I don't know where they come up with she had all this money, because she didn't act like, to me at my house, because we had that conversation, that she had that much money. Because she asked Laura how she got her car. And Jay, my husband, told her, he said, well, I found this little car for $800. And Laura said it didn't matter to her. It had 4 wheels and it could drive down the road.
Right.
It was nothing fancy. It
Yeah.
was nothing fancy.
Yeah.
So she said, that's what I want. I want something that's mine, that it's dependable, so I can, get it, and then I can trade it off and get me something bigger when I get a better job and stuff like that. But from that, I didn't gather that she had that much money in there, because for $4,000, you can buy a good used car.
Yeah, even all these years later, you can do that. Sure. She could have bought something already.
She wasn't saying, we're going tomorrow to find a vehicle with my $4,000. She did not do that. She just said it was going to be a while, because she had to get enough money. She told Laura, she said, your daddy bought you your car. I've got to earn my money.
So we've established that Danny Freeman had a bit of a temper. He was involved in some shady business, illegal activity. He was accused of abusing his son Shane to the point where Shane was living out of the house for a while and then didn't want to go back. And Shane, of course, eventually was shot by the police. All of this put together, and then, of course, the Freemans wanting to sue the police department, them wanting to get an attorney, and there was this deadline coming up in January of 2000. There is the rumor out there that somehow the police might have had something to do with the murder of Danny and Kathy, the burning of their house. What do you think about that?
Well, that's a contention by the Freeman family, even though they know everything that I know. But to them, because Danny said, if something happens to us, you got to look at the sheriff's department. They did it. They're going to kill me. I do know that the officer that shot and killed Shane and the other officers were taken to Oklahoma City to a guy that administered tests to them, polygraph test, and they all passed.
And like you said before when we talked about this, that the shooting was ruled as justified. I know we have a lot of this is back in 1999, of course. Since then, the last few years, there was a lot of news about cops shooting unarmed, men and women. A lot of contentiousness in the United States regarding that. But in this particular case, back then, this was ruled as what they would call a good shoot.
Yeah, well, actually, it's on everything that says suicide by cop.
Okay, the Shane wasn't necessarily. Yeah, something wasn't right with Shane, and he did this intentionally to get shot. Okay, but there is this rumor that maybe this lawsuit would have gone through, and the police might have had something to do with this. I think it's a little bit of a stretch, but I thought that I needed to ask you about it. Now, there are a couple other names that I'm going to mention, and we're not going to go deep into their details. The listeners can do that after them listening. But there is a Tommy Lynn Sells and a Jeremy Brian Jones who are known murderers who have at one time or another taken responsibility and then maybe backtracked on your daughter's disappearance, Ashley's disappearance, and the murder of Danny and Kathy Freeman. What do you think about these two men, Tommy and Jeremy? Do you think they had anything to do with it? Or what do you think?
Well, Tommy Lee Sells was the first one that says, hey, because he's been convicted and he's in the state pen in Texas. And he says, hey, I know what happened. But he was up in Kansas, and people that he become familiar with, if he decided he didn't like anymore, he killed people. And at the time that this was going on, he had went and visited a friend he went to school with in Kansas and was staying with them. And he went off the deep end and shot his friend, his wife, and he took a knife and cut the daughter's throat, and she had a little girl staying the night. And he sliced her throat, and then he left. The little girl that he slit her throat, the little girl, neighbor girl, she held her breath till he left. Then she held her neck, got out of the house, and went next door to the neighbors, knocked on the door till she woke them up and said, you got to help me. And by that time, they could see that the blood was coming out of it. Called the police and stuff up in Kansas. And she's the one that told them, they did find out that the husband, the wife, and their child was dead because this guy had shot him and then he cut the girl's throat, as well as the little girl that survived. She's the one. To this point, anybody he ever killed, Tommy Lee Sells, there was never no witnesses. That's how he got caught, because she could tell him who he was, and that's when they found him. But in the time, he said something about that, he knew the area, I don't know, because when they went and seen him in Texas, they took him out of prison. He told them here's where he went, took up the body to Texas. Got there. He wanted a day out of prison. But
Yeah,
things
that
he was
happens.
telling them was things he'd read. Because by this time, the media had really picked it up. Newspapers had picked it up, documented stuff. All I got to do is read a newspaper and tell them, oh, yeah, they lived on a dead-end road. You know, they lived back off the road, you know, stuff that was documented. He could not give a description of Danny or Kathy or the girls.
So you believe, and it sounds to me like many people believe, that although Tommy has talked about it, you don't believe that he had anything to do with your daughter's
No,
disappearance.
he had nothing to do with Laura's case, no.
And
He
what
just
about
wanted a day out of prison.
Jeremy Bryan Jones?
Now, Jeremy Jones, he got caught in Alabama. That's where he was caught and actually put on death row for murdering people. He did live in the Craig County, Ottawa area, because we live in Craig County. Welch is part of Craig County, but when you go off a little bit, it becomes Ottawa County. So he lived in the area all his life. He was a mean young man. The kid was always in trouble in school. Anything he dealt with, I mean, he didn't care. He'd hurt people. He didn't care. But, you know, he says that he come out to the Freemans because then he owed one of his buddies some money.
And is there any
But
proof
after,
that Jeremy Jones ever knew the Freemans?
no.
Even though both of them at one time or another has spoken up, you think that maybe they just wanted to get out of jail, like you said in Tommy's case, just reading stuff in the newspaper back at the time.
Tommy's case is he's reading the newspaper. He wanted to get out of jail.
Mm-hmm.
What more to do to say, hey, I killed the Freeman? He'll get you out. Jeremy Jones, that young man was involved in a lot of drugs, marijuana, a lot of dealings with different groups that sold it. I don't know. The young man, when he talked to them, it was never released through the media, not even to the families, what the girls were shot. I mean, what Danny and Kathy were shot with. He told them they'd been shot with a shotgun. But it was never released. How do you know? You know, so, you know, I don't know if he was just around other people that knows what happened or whether he was with people that went to the house. And that happened because I know that at 4 o'clock in the morning, Jeremy Jones was picked up for public intoxication and being higher than a kite.
And where was this? How far?
8 miles, 9 miles from the Freeman's house, back towards Miami.
Well, that certainly is interesting. But I mean, what do you lean toward? I mean, I was in our prior conversation. I have to say that I was under the impression you didn't think either of these two. Your opinion, Lorene, that either of these guys had anything to do with it. But now you're telling me maybe that Jeremy did, possibly.
Well, I don't know whether he did or he knows something or he's heard people, because a lot of the searches that we've done on properties and people we've talked to is other people being picked up for drugs, for alcohol, for, you know, stuff, and being asked, hey, if you want a larger sentence, do you know anything about the Bible Freeman family? You know, and people were saying, hey, XYZ. Well, if Jeremy runs with some of those people, maybe he'd heard it. I don't know.
Okay.
You know, I just know that when he was talked to and he said, quote, I killed the Freemans, well, where did you dump the Lauria and Ashley? You know, because he said he shot Danny and shot Kathy, shot Danny, and that he took the girls out of there, he drugged them, and he shot them. When we went looking, quote, in the place he told us, there was nothing.
Okay.
Absolutely nothing. We went all the way to Galena, Kansas, which isn't far from Veneta, you know. But, you know, we looked, and they'd say, okay, we've looked. We're looking. There's nothing there. Well, maybe it's over here. So, then he's like, and then he said, oh, I lied.
Took back what he said.
Yeah, I took back everything he said. So you don't know how much of it, does he really know something? Or was he just saying stuff to get good? Because, when you're in those type of discussions, the law enforcement treat those people very well. Very well.
Yes, yes.
Here's your steak dinner. Here we'll give you a wash and a shave and all this stuff. They're in there to get something for them, what they're telling you. How much of it's true, I don't know.
Now, you don't have to use any names, but I'm going to ask you, have there ever been any names that you believe might be more connected to your daughter's disappearance other than these two guys? I mean, you live in the area. Of course, a lot of rumors circulate around and everything. Have you ever heard a name or names that you believe might have done it more likely than these two guys?
Well, when we were searching after the girls disappeared and law enforcement would get tips and they would compile stuff and get affidavits to go search places, it was going on the intention that people said, the girls will saw hair, the girls will saw hair. That's when we searched the Chadwick property, we searched the Glover property. We've talked to in Kansas, in Chatopa, there was supposed to be a group of men there. Unfortunately, now after 18 years, some of those men are dead.
Yeah.
So you can't go talk to people that have already died.
No.
But, we have talked to a lot of people that people said, these are the people you need to talk to. You just, I'm one of these until I find her, and she may not be alive. She's alive. I want my daughter home. If she's dead, then I want to find her remains. I've told people that's like I was told by somebody's mother that I just need to stop. Well, you're wasting your time because until I find out, I may be dead. But on my time, I will not stop looking for my child. I will not.
And you believe 100%, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to give you a chance to answer. I know you've said it already, but I'm just going to point blank answer. You absolutely believe that somebody went to the Freemans that night, shot Kathy and Danny, and took your daughter and Ashley away, that those two girls did not die in that fire. That's what you believe.
Yes, 100%.
Okay. And I have to tell you, I totally agree with you. I have a lot of experience reading a lot of disappearance cases. I believe that you're correct, Lorene. But I do have to ask, and I know this is a difficult question. What's it been? What have you gone through the last 18 years? You and your family. You said you have a son. How did this affect him?
When she first disappeared, because by this time he had started his first year of college. Um, you know, he didn't see mom and dad for days and days. I mean, we'd get up early morning and we would go searching. I mean, my husband went back to work after 3 weeks. I didn't go back to work for almost 6 months, and I went searching every day. Any day. I let people know, something. I didn't get a cell phone till Laura went missing. And then I let everybody know when I did news media with all the news in the 4-state area that would cover Arkansas, Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma. I would tell people, you call me, I will come and talk to you. I mean, I've searched high and low. I've looked in wells. I've looked in ditches. Anything anybody calls and says I might need to go do, I've gone and done.
To your knowledge, in that area of Oklahoma, are there any other cases that come to mind that are like this? Where, I mean, obviously disappearances are happening all over the world, but the area where one or two girls have been abducted or anything like that within your area, maybe 100-mile radius or anything like that. Have you ever heard of a case like this in your area?
I mean, I've now, as we've investigated, people come forward saying that we have this, we have that. but they have the body to go with them. That something suspicious happened to one of our loved ones, but there's bodies. It's just not like you have no clue where they disappeared to. How can somebody totally disappear off the face of the earth?
Now, I know you have a Facebook account set up for your daughter and her disappearance. Why don't you, I'll be, of course, be linking to that. I'll be talking about your daughters and, of course, Ashley's disappearance. By the time the people hear this, they'll know that what I've done to publicize this disappearance, so everybody knows about it. But you have a Facebook page, and tell the listeners a little bit about that so they can check it out. What are you doing there?
Well, at one point after you've exhausted everything, we decided we'd use the power of the internet, or Facebook to put this out there, because everybody nowadays is technology savvy. And let me tell you, you put anything out there on Facebook, MySpace, or anything like that, it goes all over the world really quick.
It does.
So I have a niece that helped me, and we decided that, because people would text us or would call and say, where you at? Have you heard anything? So we decided to start the Find Laura Bible Facebook page so that we would put stuff on there so everybody would know. If we were doing something, or for me, if I want to start something, I put it on her Facebook page.
And I've been there, and I've seen pictures of Laura in her cheerleading outfit. I think those are some of the pictures you have, like one of the main pictures of her in her cheerleading outfit.
But that has worked in, where we are in the media world today. That gets everything out there really quick. You get people that says, hey, when when she was missing for 16 years, I was sitting there in December, and I was thinking that day, I thought, God, she's been gone half her life. Because she would have been, and I was thinking, God, how can you be gone half your life and still not know? So I put it out there. Today you would have been, you've been missing for half your life. How can this happen? And then people went on the Facebook page and said, hey, back in the beginning, we called law enforcement. We called the OSBI agent. We asked people to come and talk to us, and then they would give me their number. I would call them and find out nobody ever come and talk to them. So when we started this up again about 4 years ago, with the DA's office out of Rogers County, because the DA is over all three counties, Mays, Craig, and Rogers. I said, here we go. So we went to looking, and it was almost like tons of people come forward again that had initially called back when this investigation started 17 and a half years ago.
Huh.
But nobody came to talk to them. So how do you know we didn't miss something?
Right. I agree.
If they would leave a body in the fire and they didn't talk to 60, 70, 80 people that were calling in to give leads, how we know that these people, and people called and they say, we want to tell you what we told them. So by that time, the people that are working with us now, they've had to talk to a lot of people to find out that nobody ever, even if they were talked to, it was never documented.
Lorene, any final words before we conclude this interview for today?
My thing is, if somebody, like you said, you have your podcast about missing people and things. I guess somebody had put something out on a different site, and I just tell people, if you know something, it's been, in 3 months, it'll be 18 years. At this point, all we want is Laura and Ashley back. Hopefully alive. But, after 18 years and you don't hear anything, if they're dead, where do we go find these girls to bring them home?
Maybe I
You
should
know,
ask. Maybe I should ask you that. Who is spearheading the Ashley Freeman side of this case? You, of course.
actually, I am.
Oh, okay.
In 2012, Ashley was declared legally dead.
So
You know,
nobody
at that
on.
time when that happened, and when I found out their family was doing that for their own personal reasons, I was like, why would you do that? But there's nobody, you know, like there's not a mom, there's not a dad. The grandmother is very elderly. You know, the grandpa, Danny's father, is, you know, elderly. There's nobody to go out there and do this. But because something in the family, you know, in order to do what they needed to do, they had to declare Ashley legally dead. You know, I tell them I would never do till I get bones or I get a body or I get her alive. I'm never going to do that with Laura. So when I do it now, I put Laura out there. Find Laura Bible. Do this. When I find Laura, I'll find Ashley.
That's true. So you're kind of doing the work for two families in what you're doing.
Yes,
I.
but I don't. You know, I don't do a lot of speaking for their family because, you know, all I know is when I go to places, I'm looking for my daughter. You know, if I find her and she's in a hole somewhere, she's in a well somewhere, you know, she's in a grave somewhere. When I find Laura, I'll find Ashley.
Right. Well, I applaud your efforts, Lorene. This is a unique disappearance, and I hope that my listeners can help you in your quest to find out what happened.
You know, at this time, I just, you know, when people call me and they say, can we do stuff? You know, I try to do things because I feel like somebody led you to call me. You know, it's another avenue to keep it out there, and who knows?
Lorene, I deeply appreciate you being on this episode of Unfound.
All righty. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. And that was my interview with Lorene Bible, mother of Laura Bible. And as she said at the end, the voice for Ashley Freeman as well. I thank Lorene for being on the program. Please like, share, and follow Lorene's page on Facebook. She is also a member of the Unfound Podcast discussion group, so you can look for her there too. There were a couple points we didn't make in the interview, and that's my fault, not Lorene's. And I think these may help you as you try to figure out what happened at the Freeman home that night. First, the gun or guns used to murder Danny and Kathy were never located. In fact, police are not sure if they were Danny's or the killers brought the weapons themselves. I happen to believe they were the murderer's actual weapons, but that's just an opinion. Second, you may want to hear what it takes to burn a human body to ashes, and I had to look this up. At a crematorium, the general requirements are these: a temperature between 1400 and 2100 degrees Fahrenheit for at least 90 minutes, and that's in an oven specifically designed for that task. Whereas the average house fire burns at about 1100 degrees Fahrenheit, and I don't think the Freeman fire lasted for an hour and a half. This case is certainly a rare one, but there are similar ones out there. The Sauter children in West Virginia in 1945. In fact, it has its own Wikipedia page. The Sauter home went up in flames. After the fire was extinguished, only 4 of their 9 children were found. The parents survived. And until they died, they believed those 5 children were taken away. Yet there are plenty of rumors. The mafia took the kids. The parents killed those 5 before the fire happened because they couldn't afford them. And of course, the popular theory is that those 5 children were turned to ashes during the fire. The cause of the fire was allegedly an electrical problem, and I suggest you read the case if you're unfamiliar with it. More recently, September 23, 2012, in Unionville, Tennessee, 2 children, Chloe Leverett and Gage Daniels, disappeared after their grandparents' house went up in flames. The grandparents died in the fire from smoke inhalation, and the cause of that fire was never determined. So 2 similar cases that you can read about and study on your own. I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on how those 2 cases compare to Laura and Ashley's. However, in my opinion, The disappearances of Laura Bible and Ashley Freeman remind me of a combo of two other unsolved crimes that we're all familiar with: the Springfield Three and the massacre of the Roden family in Ohio in 2016. The Springfield Three because it seems those women were taken for no other reason than they were in the house. And the Ohio massacre because the Rodens had a lot of the same qualities as the Freemans, including the illegal activity. And really, I think the issue to this point with the Bible Freeman case has been that the police have thought it to be too much like the Roden case. That Danny and Kathy were shot due to Danny, his temper, and the marijuana business. That it was all about drugs and money. Whereas I've convinced myself that anybody who really wants to get into this case has to start considering that this is much more like the Springfield Three, meaning Laura and Ashley were the targets of the crime, not collateral damage from it. I'll leave the rest of the theorizing up to you. And that's the program. If you found it informative, please go to iTunes, Podomatic, and/or Stitcher and give Unfound a 5-star review. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've been listening to Unfound.